Hello, everyone. I know it's been a minute. I've not done my weekly or so recordings of this episodes, and I'm kind of have a backlog. So we have six decks, I think, seven decks to talk about in this video of seven spicy lists that you could try in Pioneer. Each one has put up results. So one of them is less spicy than others, but it's not exactly a tier 2 deck or higher. So it still technically counts, I guess, as a spicy list. One thing we have going for us, it looks like Control is taking a bigger grasp on the actual meta, as well as Grove Vehicles becoming the second best, or actually the best green deck in the format, because it does have a decent matchup against Azorius Control and Rakdos midrange. It does lose to Angels in this current meta, so Angels has also been on the rise. Green Devotions has took a hit, but is still technically warping how decks get built, because it still sees enough play where you kind of have to race it and be able to race it. Lotus Field combo does a great job at this. It's also pretty good against Rakdos midrange and Azorius Control, so that's pretty solid. The graveyard strategies look like they're falling out of favor. So Phoenix and Greasefang are on the dip, while White Weenie, Jund Sacrifice are on the rise. So I'm super excited. The meta is shifting. I don't know if it's for the better, because Azorius Control being 10% of the meta is kind of scary. Control is not the best thing to have at the top in the meta. So basically what the meta looks like right now is basically a shift, right? So typically if mid-range is at the top and there's not really a deck that goes over the top of it, that is when Control starts coming in. So clearly that means there is no really good deck that goes over the top of Rakdos mid-range that is pushing it down. So Control is coming in to clean up what has been missing in the format, which used to be Green Devotion, right? It used to be a triangle. Devotion beats Rakdos, Rakdos beats a different deck, and that deck beats Green Devotion. But with that has been on the collapse, Azorius Control is kind of taking its spot, filling that same kind of role. So let's get into the 7 decks that I have for you guys today. Get into it. First on my list, it got a 5-0 a little bit ago. Like I said, I have a backlog. The new spoiler season definitely has taken up some of my time. So we have Bolas the Citadel. It's Jund, right? So we do have Mayhem Devil, which is really decent for a finisher. And it looks like it has a solid plan if you can't get the Bolas the Citadel. The mana base looks pretty powerful overall. Like doesn't seem like there's any obvious weaknesses to it. Sideboard looks like we have Fatal Pushes for like mono white. We have Thoughtseize for control. Decay for spirits normally and angels. Liberator is pretty decent for artifacts and enchantment removal. Hearse is our graveyard hate. Looks like Klothys also is a decent graveyard hate that's also good against control, right? You wouldn't necessarily bring Hearse in against control, I guess, unless you're worried about supreme verdicts. But Klothys fills that same role, but also eating and doing damage without ever having it enabled as a creature, so they can't remove it. Binding the Old Gods, a little bit of kind of catch-all removal. Kind of intrigued that this is actually in the list. I guess it comes in for Collected Company to be a mid-range closer. And then we have one Core Vault, so this deck could turn in a little bit of a self-sacrifice sub-theme. That's kind of interesting, and I kind of like it. So that is a pretty sweet list right out of the gate. Let's get into the next. Now, this deck technically did not get a 5-0. It got a 3-2 in a Pioneer Invasion Classic. Elves. Now, one issue with Elves in the format currently is it does lack multiple win cons, right? We have Shaman of the Pact. If this deck ever got a second Shaman of the Pact, oh, it would be unbelievably powerful. This deck might get better after Tyvar comes out in the new set, but we do have a decent mid-range package if we can get going. Surprised, yeah. So technically, that's what I was afraid of. Like, one thing holding this deck back is the fact that they don't have a third round of elves that doesn't require something else to tap, right? So if there ever happened to be a third one, that didn't require tapping out the creature, this deck would be a little bit better, right? But also having another closer would make this deck better. But having Court of Calling as kind of essentially your, your 5th through 9th or 9th copy is pretty good. And Collected Company helps dig for your Shaman of the Pact. It looks like we have, for Shaper Sanctuary for Rakdos midrange, we have Golgari's Charm. I'm not exactly sure what this one's for. It does eat enchantments. I guess Regenerate does help against Supreme Verdict. Duly noted there. We have Revoker. It's a decent card. Pithing Needle, like effect, that you can get with a Coco or a Court of Calling. Ooze for Graveyard Hate. Pause for Reflection. I'm not sure what matchup this is for. Clearly, we're looking at a matchup probably that's a little bit more aggressive than we are. Reclamation Sage for Artifacts of Enchantment Hate that you can get with Coco or Cord. Then we have Vivian for a little bit of late game presence in case we face control or something like that. We want to be able to also produce card advantage, quote unquote, and still make beast tokens to beat down or get another creature spell when we cast one. So maybe we get a Shaman of the Pact. Actually seems pretty good in Elves. So that is Elves. Let's get into the next one. So next on my list is a kind of a budget-friendly deck that got a 5-0. And this is one of the most infamous decks in my opinion. It was 10 days ago. It was super intriguing and I liked it. So this deck is kind of playing like a role similar to Mono Blue Spirits. It has a similar mana base too. But instead of playing Spirits, we are in the design to instead go into Merfolk. We have a lot of unblockable 1-drops in Merfolk that we could just drop down, put a Curious Obsession, and start drawing cards. I'm trying to think, is there any legends that get that extra bonus? No. So yeah, so this thing only gets the draw card clause. So it is strictly in some ways it's strictly worse than this. This card forces you to attack, but the unblockable guys do help in the fact that they can't be blocked. That is one issue that Spirits has. Sometimes their creatures just get roadblocked by Reachers and they can't get through and they just lose their Curious Obsession. It's a pretty good, or they have to Kamikaze, one of their other threats. And that's great as a mono green player. So sideboard wise, we have Gus for mono green, Gruul. We have Hearse for Graveyard Hate, Brazen Borrower. We can bring in to bounce something, potentially like a Parhelion. We have Deep Root Waters as a way to make 1/1 blockers. Pretty sweet. Coppola as a way to fight Rakdos midrange, I'm assuming, to make it where they have to pay additional 2 for their fatal pushes. Mystical Dispute for the blue matchups. Sleep for aggro matchups. This deck really intrigues me. I like it. We have many ways to get in and deal damage. And we have Trickster and Harbinger of the Tides for a little bit of a tempo strategy. So that is Mono Blue Merfolk. Let's get into the next. Next on my list is Mardu Fires of Invention. So I don't know why this deck is playing 4 Spirit Sister's Call. This seems a little like overkill, but there's a lot of 1-of, 4-ofs. Actually, there's a lot of 4-ofs in this deck. Take that back. But there's a decent amount of cards that you actively want to play and sack it, so that way you can move up the chain. But then technically this is, where's Fires of Invention? Okay, so this is not an incarnation deck. So I am intrigued how this deck actually plays out. There's a lot of removal in the enchantment slots. And giving your opponent a demonic pact for the win is honestly one of the sweetest things you could ever do in Game of Magic. We have the War for the ability to sweep the board away. And Spirit's Calls does allow us to keep looping our enchantments. But there's not a really good way to actually sacrifice your enchantments. You can blink them all with the Orion. So I don't know how actually competitive this deck is. It did get a 5-0. So either the pilot that played it is just really experienced with this deck, or it might be something special against this current meta. Sideboard wise, we have Pithing Needle for Karns. We have Volleys for Mono White and Spirits. Priest as a way to fight creativity. We have Brotherhood in as a way to fight small artifacts and deal with small threats. And then we have Archon of Sun's Grace as an alternative way to just to put it down, gain life with your flying Pegasus tokens and the Archon. So that's pretty sweet. And if you know anything about Archons, they're always good, right? Archon of Cruelty, wink wink. So that is a sweet Mardu list. Let's get into the next one. Next on my list is Rogues. So this deck put up a 5-0. And it's kind of one of those decks that's also a tempo deck. And Kaido works quite well in that type of strategy. We have a decent amount of, I guess, one drop. We have a Tetsuku as a way to make our guys unblockable. One or less. I'm not exactly sure. Okay, I guess toughness. There is some toughness creatures. Doesn't seem that good, actually. I mean, because he gets a bonus on the attack if you have 8 or more in your graveyard. So does he. So, like, eventually, like, how does this thing still work? I guess it is a rogue. 4 Brazen Borrower is honestly the best rogue in the format. Ooh, Scavenger is a decent threat to close the game out. And then we have Zathorith as a way to, get their best thing in their graveyard. We have a decent amount of control pieces like Spell Pierce and Drown on the Lock to help protect our threats that are cost efficient. Sideboard wise, we have Queen to Dust for a little bit of graveyard hate. We have 3 Ray of Enfeeblement as a way to fight mono white. He also still kills elves, so that's kind of relevant. We have Thoughtseize for the control matchup, Gust for mono green, Damping Sphere for Lotus Field. We have 3 Disputes for blue-white control. And we have a Scarab God. I'm not sure where this is coming in, but I like it. I respect the Scarab God. So that is a sweet deck. So if you're interested in tempo rogues, definitely try and pick this deck up, test it out, see if you like it. So let's get into the next. So this is the next deck on my list, which is Jund Indomitable Creativity. This is the deck that I said wasn't as spicy, but it is interesting nonetheless. It's Jund, so it has Fatal Push and Thoughtseize as the way to bridge bad matchups. We also have Thought Distortion for the blue-white control matchup. Invoke Calamity. That is an interesting choice. I'm not exactly sure what this comes in for, but I'm intrigued. We have Gix Karis as a way to discard non-land and make a Power Stone, which is really good. So that way you can creatively away the Power Stone. Then we have Explosion as a way to do 3 damage to any target, make a Power Stone. So even the sideboard, like, we could diversify what we're doing, removal or discard, and still produce the artifacts required to get creativity going. So we have Big Score, 4 of and Windfall. So we have 8 copies, essentially the same effect. Mirror Breaker, of course, is the best card in the entire format, arguably. But yeah, Fire Prophecy for putting Xenagos or Worm at the bottom of your library, because that's kind of important. So that is Jund Indomitable Creativity. Let's get into the last deck of this video. Last on my list is another decently budget-friendly deck, $175, give or take. And it is Artifact Aggro. This deck does play Steel Seraph, which is one of the sweeter new additions, which I guess really does jack up the power in this deck. Because one thing that this deck sucks at is Automaton gets big and it just gets chomped. At least it becoming a flyer is kind of nice. So that's good. Same with Smith. Both of these just get chomped for days. And we have a Courier for a way to get back some card advantage. We have Reliquary to get card advantage by sacking a land. So the deck looks like it has a decent, strength behind it, as well as having some consistency, which is really important. And this deck will probably keep going on the rise as long as mono green keeps going on the downtick, right? Because Karn is probably one of the worst cards for this deck. And then again, I guess the only thing that stops is Courier, Drum, Shadow Spear, right? Everything else is you just kind of attack with it. So I guess it's not that big of a deal. It's not like a full-blown combo style artifact list where They really need Drum, and Karn is a big problem there. Sideboard wise, we have Pithing Needle for the Karn. We have Destroy Evil for Shieldridge. We have a Glass Casket as the way to fight mono white, probably. We have Hearse as a way to eat graveyards that we could also get with the Smith. We have Redained as a way to fight sweepers, push them out just enough to where we win the game. Showdown of the Scalds is a way to win also against control, where the matchup goes long, grindy, and we can cut some of the less efficient cards like Ginger Brute or something like that. Go for the long haul. We can beat them in the long haul. So that brings us to the end of the video. If you guys like this kind of content, let me know down in the comments, and like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell notification. That way you could be alerted with new other videos like this, as well as my content in general. And next on my list is I got to record the backlog of modern decks. So if you're intrigued into modern, also check that video out too. So until next time, hopefully you guys have a great rest of your day.